in having to identify that future version of yourself, that highest version of who you can feel somewhere in there that you can dare to be. I think what comes from that is the birthplace of a new self-image, right? Because who we are, who we have been has gotten us to where we are now, right? But to be the highest version of yourself, whatever that pin is for you, is going to involve you shifting your self-image to be that person now so that you can get there later, right? Because the actions and the choices and the decisions and the way that we move in the world today is setting the stage for who we're going to be tomorrow, and then the next day, and then the next day.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reshape Your Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Morgan Nolte, and our guest today is Sonia Jhas. She's a mindset and wellness expert who has a passion for helping people on their journey to live in alignment with their higher self. Her Tedx talk centers around abandoning the end destination and reconnecting with who you'd want to be if no one's watching. So I'm guessing if you've listened for a while, you can already tell I'm really going to like her. She's the author of I'll Start Again Tomorrow and Other Lies That I've Told Myself. And today's conversation is going to center around the most common self-sabotaging behaviors that I see in health and weight loss coaching. And if you struggle with the all or nothing mindset, a perfectionistic mindset, procrastination, or negative self-talk, you're going to get a lot of value from this episode. So, Sonia, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice. I'm excited to dive in with you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, give the listeners a little bit of a background of your story and how you got into this space of helping people improve their health and their mindset and their self-worth.
Oh boy. Okay. So I'm going to keep this as tight as I possibly can because I could probably spend the entire podcast giving you my life story. But I certainly never anticipated being in this space, doing the type of work that I do. Candidly, I grew up in a really, sort of strict South Asian household, and there were both spoken and unspoken rules around, where you were to end up in order to be good enough, successful enough, beautiful enough, and I think without realizing it, I believed the rule book and I did my best to follow the path. No matter how difficult it was like, okay, I'm going to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. And when it turned out that I kind of suck at physics, it was very clear that I'm neither becoming a doctor nor am I becoming an engineer. And it was sort of like a lifetime of square peg, round holing myself into this mold that I wasn't fitting into. And yet I didn't know how to break out of it because I didn't know that there was another way, right? I didn't be who I really am. And so, elementary school, high school, moved on to university, did, my BCom degree at, one of the, top schools in Canada, and came out the other side, landing this coveted executive position at IBM. I was a consultant. I was working on their largest client. It was a $400 million portfolio. It was exciting and it was sexy. And I was like, I have made it. They said if I did all of the steps and I got here, I would feel good. And like, I have arrived. And very quickly, I'd say, within the first sort of year, I was like, okay, but like, I don't feel so good. And I don't know if that's real or not, because again, I have all the ticky marks satisfied. At that point, I was, marrying my husband, who, like, much to my parents' delight, happened to be becoming a brain surgeon. And so you're like, all the things, the house, the husband, the career. And I think for me, it was like every day I would wake up with this sort of haunting, longing feeling that slowly started to turn into this dissonance with myself, like, this can't be as good as I get to feel in my life. This can't be all that there is for me. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how to solve the problem because mental health had never been a priority. How I feel had never been a priority. Connecting with how I feel had never been something I was able to do. And so I decided to get my executive MBA, because when is education not the answer to the who are you problem?
Mm-hmm.
So naively went, did my executive MBA and was like, okay, I'll just like pivot, industries. I'm just gonna solve this by getting out of the behemoth that is IBM. And after getting out of IBM, finishing the degree, moving to a smaller technology company, I think what I realized is that like I can go wherever I want to go. And this disconnect, this longing is going to come with me everywhere until I get to the crux of like what is really happening with me. I didn't know where to start digging. And I knew probably that at some point in time I was going to have a child. And I was like, okay, like if that's going to be the path, then probably the first place that I have to start is my relationship with my body, because I had been on the hamster wheel of weight loss my entire life, from as early as the age of 9. I was aware that my body was something to be fixed, and I needed to fix it however I could in order to be thin enough, in order to be beautiful enough, in order to feel good enough. And I went through, a series of eating disorders growing up, always sort of yo-yo dieting, swinging on the pendulum of up 10 pounds, down 10 pounds. And I say this recognizing that I was, born a very average, conventional size, let's call it. And the hamster wheel journey that had taken a hold of my entire upbringing was really based on so much else, not actually what my body looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I abandoned the end destination of the, weight loss. It was finally no longer about like, oh, when this party has to happen and I have to look good in that dress, I'm going to like crash diet and do the thing and then wear the dress and feel good. And, I abandoned that. I abandoned the timeline of having to quickly get skinny, retaught myself the fundamentals of fitness and nutrition. And through that process, that slow evolution of connecting with my body, learning to work with my body, not against it, embracing strength instead of size, embracing my potential instead of what the visual packaging looked like. I think slowly, what started to happen was there was like this birthing of the real Sonia. Mm-hmm. And, each day that I was dedicating myself to my wellness was another day that I was feeling just a little bit more like who I really am. And through that process, I think I also just, uncovered a passion for wanting to help women get off the hamster wheel, because it was this freedom that I felt for the first time. Like, oh my God, I had been doing it so wrong for so long, holding myself hostage by these ideals, when I could really just find a different, kinder, healthier, more compassionate approach and not sacrifice what it is that I felt was a true reflection of my insides on the outside, right? So I could have them both, and I could do it in a place of kindness and compassion as opposed to beating my body into submission. And from there, I think with that knowing and understanding, it was the starting point of, okay, we have to find a way to exit this career. I don't know where I'm going to go in this next iteration of my career, but I know that I want to be working with people. I became a personal trainer and nutrition specialist. I started working with clients one-on-one, and it was wonderful. But then it was, okay, how do I lean into what feels true for me now? Well, what feels true for me now is I want I want to work with more people. I want a touch point with more people. I want to be able to really bring value beyond the one-on-one. And so then, sort of went into the media space. From the media space, went into speaking. From speaking, then decided to write my first book, which came out this year. And it's just been a messy, complicated, but beautiful progression over the last almost 10 years of really trying to get to the crux of who I am, get to the crux of what my value is, my purpose is, and heal myself while healing others.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there. Thank you for sharing your story. I think the first thing that resonated with me was chasing external factors. And there's this thing called sunk cost bias. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I have.
So you had the relationship with the brain surgeon. You'd put a lot of time, energy, commitment into that. You'd built it up with your family. And so I'm sure that was you ended that relationship, right?
I didn't end that relationship. I ended the one before it.
The one before. Okay. So that was not the guy in the Tedx talk. Okay.
That's not the guy in the Tedx talk. No,
But
that's
you
my
were
actual
engaged.
husband now.
You were engaged, and
I
then,
was.
but that took a lot of courage to end that. Like there was a lot of, investment probably in that one. And then it also took a lot of courage to leave IBM.
Yeah.
And for people that don't know what the sunk cost bias is, it's your tendency to stay in a situation, even if it's not serving you, because you've already invested in the situation instead of cutting your losses and following your intuition. So kudos to you for just having that courage and listening to your intuition. And I think I wanted to kind of explore that a little bit more, because I do believe there are so many women dying a little bit every single day when they go to work. And I had that feeling, like as a geriatric PT, I wasn't fulfilled. It was hard work. It was emotional work. And it wasn't the work that I was called to do. And every single day I had to like read a Bible verse before I went in to see every single patient. Cause I'm like, give me the strength to make it through another day.
Yeah.
And then it kind of came to the crux of, I can't not do this anymore. I can't not pursue what I feel like is my God-given talent, which is health coaching. And, so for me, it was a painful experience to listen to my intuition, because there was a lot of sunk cost bias associated with that. My dad and my husband were like, you could just climb this corporate ladder. You have benefits. You're making a nice like a nice wage. You can keep moving up and up. And I was like, I see the people at the top.
Yeah.
And I don't want that job. I don't want to do that. And so for me, it was really a painful experience with a lot of sacrifice that, like you said, is a very messy process. But if you're being true to your inner wisdom, it almost feels like it's something that you can't not do. And I hate to use the double negative there, but
no,
is that what it was like for you too?
Yeah, I resonate with that so deeply. When I think about it now, and I think about having to call off the wedding, 2 weeks before the actual big fat Indian wedding, with 850 people and my entire family from India already here. If I try to peel that back, I'm like, I'm not sure I could do that again. Like, I'm not sure that that's something that I could do. Now, I also wouldn't be the person to get myself into that situation anymore. So it does feel like I'm talking about somebody else. But when I reflect on it, and when, people are like, wow, that was so brave and this and that and advice, I'm like, here's the thing. It was life and death at that point for my soul. It wasn't life and death for real, but for my soul, it felt like life or death. Both the quitting IBM corporate career, calling off the wedding, these big, massive shatterings of the vision have been like my soul has been called to do it, and I have never really been able to figure out, well, where did that happen? Where did the transition happen? Where it was like, I don't know, I think I might need to do something to like burn it all down.
Yeah.
But to your point, it was like at some point, something shifted and I couldn't not do it. It wasn't even my choice anymore. It was like the only way forward. Otherwise, there was no way forward. And again, I think, on one hand, that sounds super woo woo because you're like, oh, yeah, it's just like
I'm
the
all for the
force,
woo.
the force
Yeah.
is taking me with it. But if I'm being super honest, and I look back at both of those big, scary things, wrapped in your own ideals, wrapped in others' ideals, not knowing where that starts and stops with any clarity, but knowing that you have to stop the train. I think when that inflection point is there, something changes, something ignites.
Yeah, I
And
think you shift from like, I don't know, fear to excitement. I don't know. That's kind of how it felt for me when I
yeah.
was like, okay, I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. Okay, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. And then it kind of just slowly shifts to excitement. And actually, I wrote down a note when you were speaking, holding myself hostage to ideals, both of yourself and your family. And it's like how many women are trapped in ideals, holding themselves hostage to this fantasy number on the scale that may not even be realistic or healthy for them,
Yeah.
or these ideals of how much they should work out each week to feel like they've been quote unquote successful for that week,
Yeah.
or food ideals, body image ideals. So how do we break, like, how do we release that? We were talking offline about attachment and how both of us are practicing non-attachment in areas of our life. And I think that this is a huge direction that I want to take this conversation is, what does that even mean to be non-attached? Does it mean that we don't care about a goal? Does it mean that we are numb? Because that is one thing that I've been in my life, that I refuse to be again. And it was actually in college, and I was kind of stuck in a relationship that wasn't serving me, and I was just numb. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, this is the worst feeling ever. I'd rather be angry, mad, sad,
Yes.
happy, nothing but numb. And
Right.
so
Right.
how do you start breaking through those ideals?
I think, the the core of the ideals and the chasing of the ideals really, I think, can boil down to the fundamentals, which are our values, right? Like, we often get so pushed and pulled by these ideals, particularly in this world of social media, right? Where it's like nothing but perfection being positioned, nothing but ideals being showcased, and just enough imperfection to make that level of imperfection seem like perfection
Right.
in a human way that, we're, I think, so often times losing clarity, losing the touch point, losing the anchoring that we should have, must have with ourselves, our values, in order to stay in alignment. Right. And I think, when we hear the term values, we're like, okay, like values,
Mm-hmm.
it seems so topical, it seems so surface level. But when you peel values back and you really dig into the core of what we're trying to say here, it's about having clarity on what is important to you. What do you stand for? What are you actually trying to do here?
Mm-hmm.
Because when we look at our bodies, when we look at the hamster wheel, when we look at health and wellness, it's so easy to be chasing these goals
Yeah.
because they're the goals that we should have when we don't actually want them, right? Like, think about the classic woman who is desperate to be 120 pounds because that's what media said a slim and trim woman is going to be. Does that woman need to be 120 pounds? Or does she think that at 120 pounds, her body is going to look a certain way and she's coveting a certain aesthetic, right? Like, is it
Right.
about the number on the scale, or is it about the aesthetic and the visual component of it? Or is it about health and wellness? And a lot of us like to lie to ourselves and be like, I swear it's about health. I just want to be like healthy. I want to have energy. And you're like, I'm going to call bullshit.
Uh-huh.
You want to
Or
say that you want energy and you also want that. It's also a nice to have. But what you're really chasing is something different. And should it be that? That's not the point right now. The point is we need to get clear on our evaluation criteria, right? Like, what is your evaluation criteria for you as a human being so that you can make aligned choices, decisions, and actions, so that you can live with less noise, less of a tug of war, not on the hamster wheel. I think without that evaluation criteria, and for me, when I think about it as evaluation criteria versus values, like the IBMer in me is able to drop in. I'm like, amazing. I can Excel spreadsheet this. Like this feels tangible and clear to me. When we get back to values terminology, I'm a bit like, I don't know, like, am I a good person? So for me, when I frame it in the evaluation criteria category, I feel like, well, I mean, absolutely, that's crucial. We've got evaluation criteria for every other aspect of our lives. We know what we're going to be evaluated when it comes to our jobs. We know how we are evaluating ourselves to a degree when it comes to raising children, etc. We've got clarity. So rarely are we flying blind, hoping that something's going to make us feel good. We've got some sort of evaluation criteria. We do our best to satisfy it. And then we're like, okay, here's where I could have done better. Here's where I'm lacking. But when it comes to ourselves, our happiness, our wellness, our mental health, our mindset, we're just like, I don't know, like, I just want to feel good. And then it's like, well, is happiness 10 pounds away? Is happiness the next car away? Is happiness the next promotion away? What is happiness based on? And if we don't have clarity, we don't have that anchoring. And then we're just in the vortex. You know what I mean?
And you're always chasing it. And that's what I was going to bring up at the 120-pound ideal is you're reserving feeling happy until you reach that goal. Well, guess what? You only get to feel that for about 1 hour until you drink a glass of water, and then you're 120.2 or whatever.
100%.
And so I like that evaluation criteria. I think also because it helps with self-accountability and it's a filter through which you can view the world. And I wanted to ask your opinion on this because when I'm thinking about values, people can say one thing, I value this, I value that, but you can objectively, in my opinion, you can objectively tell someone's values by how they spend their time, their energy, and their money.
Absolutely.
And so if people are saying that they value their health, but they're not investing their time, energy, or money into their health, then to me, that's more of a pie in the sky type of value versus a core value. So how do you objectively kind of tell if somebody is, actually living in alignment with the values that they say they have? Mine is the time, money, energy. Do you have any?
Yeah, I think that's such a succinct way of putting it, the time, money, and energy, right? The time, money, and energy that we are investing in something is a reflection of what we value. However, I think oftentimes the time, the money, and the energy that we invest in things when we're living in autopilot can often be based on legacy values that we've carried with us.
Talk about those,
that have become habitual, at a cellular level. So we're doing things because we've always been doing things because we were told we need to be doing things. That's the framework that we were given. We bought into it. And we are not connected enough with ourselves to feel the dissonance there around the time, the energy, and the money. And so we're like, well, I don't know. This is just like what it is, but I don't feel good, but it's what it is. The legacy values, for me in particular, were entrenched in my DNA, like it just at the cellular level. And even now at this stage, I still have to fight against the current that is so natural for me because it was the environment, it was the conditioning, it was my earliest formative programming, right? And so to be able to just overcome it cleanly, I think is just sadly at this point in time, what I'm deducing, totally unrealistic.
Yeah.
Because the nervous system remembers everything. So, for me, it was those legacy values, the money, the prestige, the notoriety, the image, the ideals around education or profession or things like that that kept me chasing without me realizing that I was chasing. And all of my time and energy and money were going towards that criteria. When I actually went through the process of digging through my own evaluation criteria, I was like, ease, joy, wellness, authenticity, passion, like uncovering a calling that is uniquely my own, right? And if we just look at the career piece for a second, one set of values is you have to be the next CEO of IBM. And I believed that that was where I was going. Like, I was like, that is it. Like, I'm going to be that girl. Another version of reality is, can you create a career for yourself that is a reflection of who you really are, that is a calling that is uniquely alone, that is driven by your purpose and your passion, and also be flexible enough to allow it to evolve as you evolve. So not cling to that ideal either, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think to me, that's like a really clear example of, two roads that can look the same from the outside, right? Like, oh, she either wants to be a CEO or she wants to be on TV and famous. Like, either way, she just wants to be like big and powerful, have lots of money, and be like sort of in high demand. When in reality, when you peel back the drivers behind each of them, they're very different, right? And it's about, I think, getting clear on the nuance of what is truly yours, what is truly the way that as an adult now, you are trying to move yourself in this world. Who are you envisioning yourself to be as your highest self? Because once we have that criteria, Sonia as her highest self lives like this, feels like this, moves like this, thinks like this, prioritizes this. Well, then we've got like a pretty loose framework for us to start to fill in the gaps around to get precise, right?
To reverse engineer the path to get there. But I think a lot of people either don't understand the value of this or they haven't done it properly in a way that it speaks to them. We call it our personal faith formula. And I was editing someone's yesterday in office hours, and I said, okay, you're filling out all of these questions from the perspective of your current self. What do you want to do or do better? Like, what actions are you taking consistently? How are you able to impact your family and community? All those things. And I said, no, we have to fill this very detailed document out from the perspective of your future self.
Yes.
So that we can then work towards becoming that person. But it's just like a map, like it's like a pinpoint on the map is that best future version of yourself. And if you don't have a pin plugged into your Google Maps, Google Maps doesn't know where to take you. If you don't have that pin in your brain doesn't
how
know
is
where
the
to
GPS going to know where to go? Right. And I think that to me, as you frame it like that, is so powerful because one, you need to have the pinpoint so that the GPS can actually guide you to where you want to go if you're willing to let it, right? Yeah. The other piece of it, I think, is that in having to identify that future version of yourself, that highest version of who you can feel somewhere in there that you can dare to be. I think what comes from that is the birthplace of a new self-image, right? Because who we are, who we have been has gotten us to where we are now, right? But to be the highest version of yourself, whatever that pin is for you, is going to involve you shifting your self-image to be that person now so that you can get there later, right? Because the actions and the choices and the decisions and the way that we move in the world today is setting the stage for who we're going to be tomorrow and then the next day and then the next day. It is the snowball. It is the catalyst. And I think that's where the I'll start again tomorrow narrative gets blown up, right? Because we have this idea that, well, tomorrow's Sonia is no longer going to be pulled by cupcakes. She's not going to snooze her alarm. She's not going to have XYZ challenges because like it's going to be out of her system.
She's
She's
gonna
going
have
to
so
be
much more
over it.
time.
She's going to have more time. She's going to have more energy. She's going to care more. She's going to be passionate. Something's going to shift because tomorrow's Sonia is not going to be held back in the same way that today's Sonia is. So today's Sonia is going to get it all out of her system. She's going to eat all the cupcakes. She's going to, just rot in her existence. And she's just going to be so sick of what she's doing to herself that then tomorrow she's going to fix herself. When in reality, this idea of the pin, this idea of having to get clear on that is what allows us to then start to shift our self-image. And that self-image shifts how we are operating in every choice, in every decision, in every moment, because we have to, right? You can't do the same thing over and over again, hoping for a new reality. But I think so rarely do we have the insight, the clarity, and the agency, like forcing ourselves to be the responsible adult in the picture, to say, if I want something different, one, I need to know what that is. Two, I need to be willing to do the work to get there. And step number one of that is, okay, how do I have to show up today then? How do I have to live in alignment today to get there? And I think that is so challenging, but it's so important. And for any of us who have had to make those big, massive changes in our life, I think we know, arguably maybe the harder way, that one way or another, that work is going to get done, right? One way or another, it is going to find you, it is going to hunt you down, and you are going to have to course correct your life. If you are living a life with your eyes open, right? Or with your soul open, or with something open, right? A connection to yourself.
Yep.
And so why not do it the healthier, better way, where you don't have to make these massive crisis pivots in your life, whether it's about your body or whether it's about your career or your husband or whatever? Is there a saner, gentler, kinder, more natural evolution to that pin place so that life doesn't have to feel so hard, Yeah,
I think being proactive is huge with our choices. I think about in geriatric physical therapy, a lot of times we would see somebody maybe that they were living in their homes, for example, and they weren't safe to be in their homes. And I would talk to their caretakers and they would be frustrated. Oh, mom really needs to move to an assisted living facility or, long-term care. And I said, well, it's going to happen either way. It's just either going to happen by your choice or it's going to be an emergency. And they're going to fall and they're going to go to the hospital and it's going to be super stressful for everyone. So you guys can either figure out a way to get this done proactively to reduce everyone's stress, or you're going to be dealing with an emergency. And that's exactly the same thing with your health.
it is.
So you can figure out a way to do it proactively in a way that's gentler and more patient and kind and sustainable. Or you can wait until you're diagnosed with diabetes, or you have a stroke, or you have a heart attack, or you have some sort of damage to your health that then gives you that kick in the pants. So I think that's really interesting. I have a couple of questions before we get too far along. You said that growing up, you always felt like you weren't good enough. You weren't pretty enough. You weren't thin enough. And this is a common thread. I think so many people feel that way. I do, or I did sometimes. And I think mine is more so on the smarts. I think in your Tedx talk, you mentioned you had a really smart brother. So
oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
As do I, and so I think that education was very big in our family. And every single day in my personal faith formula, I have to tell myself, I am good enough, I am smart enough, and I am worthy of abundance and unconditional love. And so I think positive self-talk has not necessarily come natural to me, but it's been such a powerful tool that I'm trying to teach my children. And I'm wondering if you're doing the same with your children. And if you are, how are you doing that? Because last night I was hot tubbing with my kids, Dawson and Leah. And all of a sudden they just started saying like their school creed. And it's something like, I am a cougar. My destiny is open to me. I will be responsible. I will be blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, today is a new day. And I'm like,
Yep.
kudos to that school for teaching those children. They say it right after the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm like, my 3-year-old and 5-year-old are probably developing better mindset habits than so
Yes.
many adults that I coach, because their school is being intentional
Yeah.
to frame that every single morning.
I love
And I
that.
thought, wouldn't it be cool to come up with like, I am a Nolte, and then, come up with like a family creed, and something in there would be, I am enough and I am unconditionally loved.
Mm.
And what would your, how do you instill those? Let me ask you that in a different way. How do you not pass down the legacy values that didn't serve you to your children? How do you break that
Yeah.
chain?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Such a good question, and so complicated, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's so easy to grow up being like, my parents are the monsters. My parents are the monsters. And then you go off to university and you realize, oh my God, like somewhere along the way, I became the monster. And that monster energy goes so deep,
Mm-hmm.
right? I remember there was a point in my life where I was, starting to do therapy sort of for the first time. And it was, CBT, so not somatic work, but it was a lot of talk therapy. And I had this aha moment where I realized that, like, oh, like the negative voice in my head is actually my mom. She's the negative voice in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so fascinating for me to distill that down with clarity, because I was like, oh, this is where I stop. This is where she starts. And everything that's happening from here onwards is not a reflection of how I think, how I feel, what I truly want, the authentic core that I'm trying to build my life around. And so I think, the the starting point for me in trying to not pass down my monster stuff has been cultivating tremendous awareness,
Right.
deeper
That's an
and
excellent
deeper
point.
awareness, that ability to catch and release the negative narrative at its infancy rather than in the spiral. Because
Mm-hmm.
I will say that, like, even now, my predisposition is to be pessimistic, negative. I'm like generally like sort of foreboding. I have that foreboding feeling all the time. And my nervous system is perpetually dysregulated still. Like I feel the impact of being in fight or flight all the time, whether I am or am not, because that's just my baseline still. And the more that I'm able to have that sensitive awareness, the more that I'm shifting the cycles, the more that I am breaking the patterns, the more that I am releasing the little t trauma, right? And I think that for anybody is the starting point, right? First, we're numb, right? We don't know. Then we wake up and it's horrifying. Then we have to allow ourselves to realize that, like, it is safe enough for us to go on this journey with ourselves. We won't die.
Right.
And as we start to create that safety for ourselves, we're able to tune in more. We're able to catch and release more. And for me, the spirals can still happen, but they're few and far between. And also my ability to catch them in the first narrative, in the first line, has gotten much better and continues to get better. And what I do is I will hear it. I'll be like, pull out your phone. I write it down and I put it away right away. I don't like sit there and analyze it, because like we're busy, we're working, we're doing the things. Like I'm not like sitting here trying to have a therapy session with myself all the time. I don't have the time for that. But in just acknowledging it and being like, that was an asshole thing to say to myself. I wrote it down. I put it away. That already does such an effective job of the catch and release,
Yeah.
that then I'm
I
able
like
to
that.
find that voice again, find the Sonia in there somewhere, the Sonia who doesn't hate herself, the Sonia who is not plagued by low self-worth and low self-esteem, the Sonia who believes in her purpose, her highest self, right? So the awareness piece, I think, is critical. The second piece of it, I think, for me with my kids has been really trying to feel my way through parenting, as opposed to coming at parenting with that handbook or that rule book, the way
that every mom wants to have that doesn't
that every
exist.
mom wants to have,
Yeah.
right? And that, you know, we all sort of can pretend like we have seen before based on what our parents did, right? Like it feels like, well, there shouldn't be a handbook, but then we are also like subconsciously like, but there was a handbook, and but I don't like that handbook. And so I think for me, the biggest piece when it comes to parenting, particularly my daughter who's 8, so she's like preteen, and it's very like, oh, like I see you, this is very familiar, and also like, God, was I an asshole to my parents too?
Yeah.
Like, what is even happening here? And so I think, you know, that feeling my way through it, the staying connected with myself, the communication aspect of it, I think, with myself as I'm feeling my way through it is really important, right? Because it's like, on one hand, I've now been able to cleanse myself of the negative spiral, the negative narrative, all that sort of stuff. Now I'm staying connected. I'm feeling my way through it. I'm creating a communication loop with myself to say, okay, how is this feeling? Something's not feeling right here. What am I doing? Am I reacting here? Or am I participating in something that isn't coming from that reactive, semi-toxic place? So there's awareness and there's communication with myself, honoring what I'm feeling, and then allowing myself to verbalize it so that I can move with it. But then I would say the third piece for me, and this is what I think I'm really starting to practice and lean into now, is actually communicating it with my kids. Actually communicating with my kids. Okay, so like, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. This is what's happening. And here's sort of where my actual stance is on it. Bringing them into the conversation a little bit around, I think, humanizing parenting and humanizing the relationship between parent and child, which I didn't have.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to self-worth and self-esteem, I think it's one thing to be preaching self-worth and self-esteem. But in my version of reality, I think, as I said earlier, you know, like, I'm just trying to heal myself so that I can also help heal others. I think that holds true when it comes to my children also, that bringing them into the human aspects of my healing journey, what it is that I'm struggling with. This part is feeling off. This part is feeling tough. I don't know. Here's what I'm struggling with. Here's where my narrative is going wrong. Here's what I am in the vortex of. I think, one, it allows for really open, honest communication collaboratively to create a safe space for them. But also it allows me to really bring my most authentic self to parenting by showing them how it is that I'm trying to show up for myself differently, right? At this age, at this stage, so that they understand that it's not like, and then they're going to heal, then they're going to have good self-worth and good self-esteem. And then it's going to be like so good after that by the age of 10 onwards.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the thing we all struggle with. Here are the practices and the tools and the things that I'm doing. Here's where I'm really struggling. Here's where, you know, when we got into that argument and I did that thing to you, this is what it really did to me. And then I apologized, and then I take accountability. And then here's also what I further did after that. I think that's it for me at this point in time in my version of parenting. It's like awareness, feelings, communicating that back to me, and then bringing my kids at whatever age level they're at into the narrative of how do we move towards our highest selves, recognizing that it isn't going to be clean or easy or perfect.
I think something that I thought of as you were speaking there was how uncomfortable it can be sometimes to break that pattern. Like I know that my parents tended to focus on my achievements a lot. And I got attention when I did things right, or they would also point out like what I didn't do perfectly.
Yep.
Obviously that spiraled into perfectionism, which is I'm recovering. But what I find is when I, like yesterday in the hot tub, when I said, Dawson, Leah, look me in the eye. I said, you are enough. You are unconditionally loved. As much as I mean it, it didn't come naturally to say it.
No.
Because I didn't hear it.
No.
And I think that is something as parents, we're talking about self-esteem and self-worth. I think that's so important to tell our children the things that we wanted to hear, and
Absolutely. Like that, I think is so important for them and it's so important for us, right? Because like it's almost like as we're parenting, we're reparenting
yeah,
ourselves, which is
exactly.
deeply uncomfortable and doesn't feel natural. You know, you're fighting against the current of turning into your father, even though you're trying your best not to. But then also bringing to your children what you feel like you didn't have, closing that gap for yourself. And here's the thing,
Mm-hmm.
we can say it to our children, but it won't land in their nervous system unless we mean it.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't mean it unless we actually believe it for ourselves. You can't have low self worth and have low self esteem, right? Self esteem being the, what do you want to call it? The abilities, performance, external based stuff versus self worth being who you are at your core, that intrinsic value that you carry as a person, right? We can't talk about self esteem and self worth, the outer and the inner, and hope that it's going to land with our children if we're not doing that work for ourselves, if we come from these places that, you know, have led us to not have healthy self-worth and healthy self-esteem, right? So I think it's so important to be saying the things, but it's so important to also recognize that you can say it, but they're not going to feel it until you can feel it for them and for yourself. And so let that be a tandem journey where we are living it for them and we are living it for ourselves so that it can land deeper for them.
I think that goes to you can't give what you don't have.
Yes. Oh, I
And
just love
man,
how you synthesize.
thank you. You
Mm.
can't. And I think maybe that, I talk about my parents a lot on here, but they really fought for their marriage. They fought for their careers. They didn't always have it easy. And I think that looking back on my childhood, my mom is an attorney, and so she was a divorce attorney. And she was underpaid for the work that she was doing. She kind of had to claw her way up and started her
Yeah.
own firm. But looking back, I could absolutely maybe appreciate some feelings of insecurity or not feeling good enough.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps maybe that's
Yeah.
that she wasn't able to instill that in me. But thankfully, over time, I did develop that through good relationships with her and my grandparents and all of that good stuff, but can I shortcut that for my kids?
Yes.
Can
Yes. I
they
think
go
that's what
through
we
their
all
life,
want.
right, with the
Can we make it
confidence?
easier? Can the journey be
Yes.
less tumultuous, for them because of what we've learned for ourselves?
Right. Like it's just how much more freedom can people have when they're not constantly second guessing themselves, when
Mm-hmm.
they're not constantly worried about the actual or perceived judgments or opinions of other people.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
think that that's kind of what this is all about for me, is that personal growth and development, so that I can impact not just my family, but just like you, like I just have a heart for impacting other people to bring them to that place of self-worth, self-love, you know, self-esteem that maybe they didn't have growing
Mm-hmm.
up. Because
Yes.
just because I loved how you said that the sensitive awareness, I think, is so important. And especially when it comes to negative emotions, I think so many people want
Mm-hmm.
to turn a blind eye from how they're feeling, from that negative self-talk. And the way that I view that is that negative self-talk is like an internal lie detector test. And it's like, if you're
Yep.
feeling those emotions of fear, of worry, it's like, oh, that you're telling yourself something that's not true here.
Mm-hmm.
So for people maybe that are struggling with a low self-esteem or a low self-worth, and they struggle with that negative self-talk, what's kind of your best advice to start changing that narrative?
It's a great question. I think for me, and this is sort of going to build on what it is that I was touching upon earlier. When it comes to that negative self-talk, when it comes to those limiting beliefs, the stories, the lies that we tell ourselves, about why we're not good enough, why we're not smart enough, why it's not going to work out, why there's no point in trying, why we're going to get in trouble, whatever it is. I think, first of all, important for us all to just humbly recognize that, like, we're all doing it. Okay. We're all doing it. We are all dealing with the limiting beliefs, the negative narratives. It is intrinsic. Yep. And so, I think that comes to your point that you made earlier around, like, okay, but the feelings are the barometer, right? The feelings are the evidence that, like, something's not right. Something's not good. That's not good. You're not feeling good because what's happening in your mind is not in alignment with your highest self, with how you want to feel, right? There's that disconnect. So I think the acknowledgement, yes, is really important. And your feelings can be such a great avenue into that awareness, as opposed to being like, okay, like, what am I going to be swatting flies with my thoughts? Like, how do I catch all of them?
That. Yeah.
Right. I think the feelings are the best way to be like, I don't feel so good. Something's wrong. What am I thinking? Okay. What I'll say that I do as a practice, and I have found this to be so, so, so powerful, is when I find that I am starting to feel the activation of my negative narrative, right? So one is like, I had a thought, that's not kind, write it down, bye. But when I feel like there's that feeling of dread starting to take hold in my system, that anxiety, that stress, that fear, that whatever it is, and I always feel it sort of in my gut and in my shoulders. At that point, when I can clock it, I will take out a notebook, whether it's, electronic or a laptop or whatever it is, and I will verbal diarrhea everything that is just trapped in my mind. Mm-hmm. All the narratives, all the thoughts, all the fears. I'm worried this is going to happen. Then if this happens, this is going to happen. And then I don't know. What if they're not going to pick me? What if I don't get the job? What if all of it. And I do it in a way that is fast so that I can't coach myself as I'm doing it, because I do suffer from perfectionist tendencies, and I can start to evaluate my grammar. I don't know, that like sentence doesn't sound right. Is that really what I'm trying to say? Like, I can accidentally do that to myself, even when I don't mean to, because it's just ingrained. And so I will verbal diarrhea as fast as I can without second reading what it is that I'm writing as I'm doing it. And then as soon as I'm done and I feel like, yeah, there's nothing left for me to say because I'm just repeating myself, I will put it away immediately. I don't unpack it. I don't try to process it. I don't call my therapist. I just put it away. And first and foremost, I think what that does is give you like major catharsis.
Yeah.
First and foremost, right? Like just the act of letting it all out, unleashing it onto paper is very, very cathartic. And so automatically you're like, okay, the world is not ending. I am safe. It is fine. Shoulders have dropped back down. Stomach is a little bit looser again. And I know that, like, I'm going to deal with this later. It's not, I'm not going to deal with it. It's, I'm going to deal with this later. So there's no need to spiral right now because this isn't the time. There's going to be a time later. I find myself able to move again, be more aligned, centered. From there, when I have the opportunity, usually the same day, ideally, when the kids have gone to bed and my husband and all that, and I'm actually by myself, I will take what I have written. And the first time I read it, I just read it, the whole thing, start to finish. And I really sort of try to read it with compassion.
Exactly.
As my adult self, as if my child self wrote that, as if scared little 5-year-old Sonia, who's worried about the monsters coming to get her, wrote all that down. I read it as my anchored adult self. And I don't read it if I can't get to that place. If I don't know that like adult Sonia's in the driver's seat, I won't read it because then I'm just going to resonate with it and be like, oh my God, I'm freaking out again, right? So I read it once as adult Sonia. The second time I go through it, I will actually once again take out a notebook or whatever it is, and I will go line by line or thought by thought, and I will find a rebuttal or refute the thought based on actual evidence from my adult life right now around why that's most likely not true, why it doesn't hold up, why when I throw shade at it, actually, there's no way for it to fight back at me. And when I go through that process, and I complete the whole exercise, by the end, what comes out of it is a new set of very nuanced affirmations that I will then use the next day for however long I need to, for it could be weeks, it could be a few days, where I'm then proactively getting ahead of the negative narrative that I know is like simmering in there somewhere. There's a theme that is taking hold of me right now. And I will use those affirmations to set the tone for my day, re-anchor myself as the adult. And I found that to be the only way that affirmations have actually worked for me, right? So not these like vague concepts of like, I'm powerful, but rather nuanced self-statements that I can really believe in because I've done the evidence approach, I've done the rebuttal, I've debated the thing, and I believe that this is true. That's then how I move through that next chapter. And it works every time. It is so powerful. I can't say enough about it.
I'm going to definitely use that. I have done it where I've written out my negative thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't, and I've maybe done the rebuttal internally, but not on
Yes.
paper. And so I think that'd be a very helpful exercise.
And it's super helpful internally too, the way that you're doing it. But I find that there's something that requires even more clarity and precision when you're going to write something down, because you can't be wishy-washy about it. You're not like, yeah, I get it. You're like, no, what is that sentence though? Like, what am I actually trying to say here? And it's a great way to just let the noise evaporate.
Yes. Well, I've really appreciated your advice today and this conversation. I think that, I hope it was just kind of like people were sitting in on us having a cup of coffee together, just kind
Yeah,
of talking about things that we're passionate about, because we both just have such a heart for helping people become the best version of themselves, both physically, but also mentally and emotionally. So can you please let people know where they can get your book or check out your website?
absolutely. Yep. My website is soniajhas.com, and, relatively active on Instagram, as we all
You
have to
are.
be, and
Yep.
TikTok and the things. So you can find me on social sort of everywhere. And then my book, I'll start again tomorrow. And Other Lies I've Told Myself, is available everywhere you can get books. So, you can grab it online, literally anywhere, or in bookstores. And yeah, my DMs are always open. I think that is one thing that I would really encourage people to do. Slide in there if you have something that you need to get off your chest, or something that you need advice on, or something that I can support you with. Because, I think, as we sort of both shared earlier, that's kind of what we're here for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I look forward to connecting.
Thank you so much for your time and expertise today. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
So great.